Hi, this is Dr. Parikh, and today we're going to look at how to do a search using PsycINFO. So we're still in Unit 1, and this is the online class setup, so if you're in person, yours might look a little different. We are looking at articles 1 through 3. The other way to find it is to go under Literature Review, and there's articles 1 through 3. There's no template for this, but there is a certain way that I want to see the files named. So I want to see at least the first author's first name, because that's always going to be part of your citation. You can include the other authors if you want. You can do a first author at all, but at least one author's last name, the year that the article was published. So for these, it's not you, it's the author of the article, so that I can tell the different articles apart. And then the first few words of the title. It doesn't have to be a lot, just in case I get confused, something to help me figure out which is which. The reason I have you name it in a particular way is that you are going to be uploading these particular files a lot, because most of your paper, most of your assignments relate to these files. And once I'm in Blackboard, I can only open one grading, I can only grade one thing at a time. And so even if you've already uploaded it in a previous assignment, I have to completely get out of what I'm doing. So I have to save or lose all of my work so far. Stop what I'm doing, go back out, go through several steps to figure out where you have submitted it, pull that up, look at the article, and then go back again. It's just a crazy amount of work. So instead, I just ask you to keep this in an easy to see, safe place. And almost every time you submit something, there'll be a little reminder saying, hey, you need to include those PDFs. And I have you name it a certain way so that I can find it based on what you're writing. So what happens is, if there's something that seems a little unclear to me, or if I'm not sure if it's quite right, I can just pop right into your article. Maybe it's a formatting thing and I'm checking to see if the page numbers are the way that you say they are, or something like that. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. Or it might be that I'm looking at trying to understand a concept. Something just doesn't seem clear to me, so I'm trying to figure out what the original actually is, to see if maybe you misunderstood it, or if it's just not very clear the way you've said it, or sometimes it is and it just is a surprising finding that I wasn't expecting. And so for this, you just upload your 3 PDFs, and this is an assignment, it's one of the few where you do it until I'm happy. So there is a rubric here. File name, I may let you skate through with less than full credit on the file name, but it needs to be peer-reviewed, so it needs to be in a journal. That's different from a book chapter or a magazine article. It needs to be in an academic journal. Because for a journal, other academics read this paper, gave feedback on it, often requested that some changes be made, some things be clarified, sometimes even have some more analyses run before it's published. So if you submit an article that isn't appropriate for this paper, I'll ask you to go find another one. So for this assignment, you're going to be looking in PsycINFO. So go to the library's webpage. You can get there through our university main page, or I like to go to caldwell.edu/library. I find that easier. Scroll down there is this summon, which is sort of like Google in that it searches everything that the library has, but it brings back everything that the library has. So it's great if you just misplaced your article and you know the title and you just need to pull it up, but it can be a little overwhelming if you're not an experienced searcher yet. So instead, we'll go into the articles and databases, Psych and Counseling, and you want to go down to the one called PsycINFO. It's a great one. It's one of the biggest, one of the best. I'm not sure why my computer is angry and has been doing that lately. There we go. And now I'm not sure why that's so big. Yep, but here we are, Caldwell University. So PsycINFO is not a very smart search engine. It's a great search engine, but it's not very smart. It's kind of clunky, and so you have to learn how to work it. And to be honest, if you're having trouble finding what you're looking for, it's possible that it's not out there, but it's also very possible you're just not searching the right things. You can always come to office hours. I will happily help you do a search, But honestly, the librarians over at Jennings Library are much better at this than I am. They are ninjas. This is what librarians are trained to do, is find stuff. So they have a much deeper understanding of how this search engine works than I do, and they just know a lot more places to check. So I have a few tricks I can pull out. I'm happy to help, but the librarians for this are a better fit, and they, you can go to the reference desk and just ask if anyone's available. So the hours are a lot more flexible than my office hours too. So let's say I know I want to write a paper on depression, and I search depression. I'm going to get 1 million results, or 313,045 results. There's a few ways to narrow this down to begin with, and you'll want to check these every time you do a search. I would say at least start with linked full text. That means the library has immediate access because they pay to subscribe to those journals. That limits how many come up. So now we went from 313,000 to 64,000. Let's say you're searching a really specific topic and you're not getting enough sources, then you might uncheck that box. That means you need to wait for things to come in, though, because the library has to ask another library to send it in. That usually takes about a week, sometimes less, sometimes more. If you want to do that, I'm going to ask you to find another article that could sort of work for your paper to turn in for now, and then request that better article, and when it comes in, you can replace the first article. I do that because sometimes articles aren't, you read the abstract, it seems like a great fit, and then you get it in, and either it's really difficult to read, or it's not quite the topic that you thought it would be. So I want you to always have something on hand that could work, but I encourage you, if there's something that the library doesn't have that would make your paper better, certainly see if you can find that. The next thing is the dates. I don't have a strict limit for this class. Other classes I might say the last 5 years or the last 10 years, because research, we find better ways of measuring things. We find ways to overcome our biases, so maybe we find better populations. And sometimes society shifts and things that were true before aren't true anymore. And so it's best to be within, that wasn't the way I wanted to go. I wanted to go, so right now it's 2019, so that's the head. I would say, so I don't have a strict guideline because I really want to focus on you being able to have things that are relevant. Oh, I said, 2019. All right, so I would say, 10 years is a good starting place, maybe even 5 years. But I'm willing to let you go a little broader than that. Let's update it. So we're cutting down. We're down to 38,000, but that's clearly way too many to wade through. A few more things. You want to choose your source. See, there's journals and books. You want journals only for this source, for these sources. That's what makes them peer-reviewed. Now, you also want them to be empirical, meaning they're a specific study. And you can go under methodology and click empirical study. So now we're down to 33,000. Still a whole lot to wade through because our topic is too broad. Depression is just way too broad. So let's say I'm interested in how crafts like knitting might help with depression. Well, nothing came up. Let's say I try depression and crafts. That's not actual crafts. This doesn't look like actual crafts. I don't know. This may not be something that I can find anything. Narrative strategies, that's still not, I'm not finding a lot of things that seem to fit. So there's a few things that you can do when when either your topic, let's start with a topic that's way too big, like depression. So you need to narrow it down. I would just start with good old Google. You want to learn more about the topic to see what some of the subtopics are. Another great way is to go back to your Gen Psych textbook and look through, try to remember what chapters were interesting to you or find the topic you're interested in. There's even an index in the back that'll tell you all the places where that topic is discussed. I will deny this, even though it's in a video. I'll deny saying this later, but Wikipedia can also be a good place to get basic information. So if I go to Wikipedia and I search depression, let's see, and I want to focus on the mood disorder, Wikipedia is not a scholarly source. Every time you cite Wikipedia, a piece of my soul dies. So do not cite Wikipedia. Wikipedia is like your friend's parent who knows a lot about the topic. You can't cite them in a paper, but you can go to them to learn about it. So you can learn different, for example, you can learn depression is this whole category that has lots of diagnoses related to it. And you can learn a little bit and figure out what seems to catch your interest. You could also just start looking through one at a time and see if anything happens to catch your interest. Keep an eye, make sure that your boxes are all checked the way they were before. And here you can see, because I did a new search, the methodology got unchecked with a new search. So the linked full text and the year stayed, but the methodology went away at some point. So those are so let me go back to Google for a moment. So let's say I'm interested in how creative crafts like knitting might help with depression. So I might just Google depression and knitting. What I'm doing, again, none of these things, I'm not expecting to find anything that's actually an empirical or even a scholarly source. What I'm looking for is the terminology. I'm looking for what sorts of things I could search for to find what I'm looking for. So, therapeutic knitting. Here I'm seeing stress and anxiety, so maybe if I want to look at knitting, I would be more focused on anxiety. But I'm also looking for keywords, mindfulness. So now let me come back and I'll search depression and mindfulness. Now again, I'm going to check to see, and I have to go back in and check my empirical study, or I'm going to get a lot of things that don't fit as an empirical study. So here's something that could be focused. Mindfulness-based cognitive therapy for depressed individuals improves suppression of irrelevant mental sets. So I'm not really where I started. If I'm interested in knitting, let's try knitting and mindfulness. Nothing came up. Let's try taking out linked full text. I found one thing, but look here, it's a dissertation. So that's not really what I'm looking for. I'm looking for journal articles. Now I could look at, so I would have to figure out how to get access to this dissertation. I could look at their reference list and maybe see what kinds of things they looked at. But this topic is probably not going to work out. So what else am I interested in? I'm interested in tattoos and meaning making. Now I want linked full text. I still have my years. I want academic journals. I only have one article that popped up. Now I can look at their reference list, see the cited references. I can actually see some of the articles they used and maybe get to new sources that way. I could also, instead of meaning making, now I can look at, I can look at advanced search. I can also go into the thesaurus. And let's say I'm looking for meaning, because only one thing came up. So I want to see if there's other, let me try meaning making. So if it doesn't come up in the thesaurus, that's a good indication that it's not the kind of term that people are using. let's see if I want to look at tattoos and grief. So, because my actual interest is, when I say meaning making, I really mean people getting tattoos sort of in memory of a person, an event, something. So under grief, and the thesaurus will help you see other sort of what kind of terms you might want, and you can click on it as a major concept. So bereavement, I want that as a major concept, and maybe emotional states. I don't know if that worked out the way I wanted it to. And here you can see they're using like old school Boolean search terms and or, yeah, and I'm getting absolutely bupkis. That is why, again, if you want to use some of these deeper tools, the librarians are honestly much better at it than I am. But let's say I do tattoos and meaning. How did that come up? And I can go linked full text. Maybe I leave the years a little more broad. But now I'm kind of back to different sorts of sources. When you see volumes, things like that, that's a good indication that you do have an academic journal. All of these, it says, are from academic journals. Now let's look at what makes something empirical. So you click on something that you're interested in. The abstract is like a snapshot of, so usually the first thing you see is the title. Then you see the abstract, which is a snapshot of the whole article. It usually will tell you who was involved. So if you can't find numbers or descriptions of people, it may not be empirical. Because a lot of articles just write about what other people have done or write about theory. But you need things that are talking about some sort of study. They may have actually talked to people themselves. They may have used previous data sets. That doesn't really matter. But what's important is that they used something, that they actually analyzed data in some way. You can do PDF full text. You can also add things. I don't know if I've used the Google Drive. Oh, and it didn't like my pop-up. Sorry, I know this makes for super exciting video. You can also email it to yourself. I'm not going to pull up my Google Drive right now because there's some confidential things on it, and I don't know what's going to pop up on screen. You can also email it to yourself. Always make sure that you are including the PDF with it. So I could email it to myself. It doesn't matter what the from is. And make sure, and I usually like to put the article title in the subject. And I might do like PS 213 so that when I'm searching, you always want to think, what would I look for if I searched my email? So you can email it to yourself. That's an easy way to get the file. You can also click over here. There's link full text. If you print from here, it's going to print this page, which is not helpful. So going to PDF full text, I highly recommend printing these out. I am a very digital reader, pry my Kindle out of my cold dead hands, but journal articles are one of the things that I really have to read. So if you're going to print, I would sort of move your mouse in here and use this print feature and check what it's going to print. Now this is 16 pages, so it seems like it's a really long article, but if you look here, it's actually they're half-size pages. It's, a journal that's folded in half. So don't just look at the number of pages. Look at how big the pages actually are. So even at 16 pages, this is a really reasonable read. And you can go to the library to print if you want to. So you can look through here, and you want to look, you see words like the current study, that's a really good sign. You want to look for things like hypotheses. So here, one hypothesis. And then a method section. Almost every empirical article is going to clearly label something as the method section. You should find a place where it talks about the participants. Again, even if they didn't collect their data, they should tell you where the data is from. So you have the method section with participants, something that says like materials or measures or instrument, and then procedures. Not every article follows exactly that format, but it's a pretty standard format. And then results. There should always be a results section. Some articles are what are called meta-analyses, meaning they analyzed a lot of previous data. Some of them are pretty detailed, and I'll let you use them as one of your articles, but they're a little more difficult to make fit for some of the assignments for the course. So I recommend trying to find 3 that are just plain old traditional studies. And then later in the course, there's a point where you get to pick a 4th resource that's anything scholarly. That's because studies are really narrowly focused. They're on one research question, and it's really tough with just 3 or 4 articles to pull together an integrated, cohesive paper. Later on in your career here at Caldwell, you'll write papers that have 8 or more resources, and at that point, there's so much material that you can weave it together and pull things through. But for this class, I don't want to overwhelm you with resources, so once you have a clear sense of what you'll need to tie everything together, I let you go find that in anything that's scholarly. So a book chapter. Still not things like Psychology Today is a magazine, so that would be a magazine article that's not considered scholarly. But anything that's scholarly you can use at that point. But for now, you want to look for a pretty traditional empirical article. And you come, so there's the results section, and then there is the discussion section. Here we go. Discussion. If you're not sure if an article is a good fit, the abstract is the best place to start, but the next place to look is actually the discussion section. The first 1 or 2 paragraphs, because this is where they've laid out most of their paper, they told you what they found, and this is the place where the author stops and takes a breath with you and says, okay, here was the main purpose. This is what we set out to do. And then in pretty plain English, they tell you what they found. So the first couple paragraphs of the discussion section are a great way to figure out what this article is really about and decide whether it's a good fit for you. Once you know that you want it, you can print it, you can email it. At some point you need to save it. I usually just save it from right here. You download, and remember, you need to use this file a lot. So pick a good place to save it. I'll start with my desktop, and you want to use the naming convention. Oh goodness, I can't find the author's name now, so I'll do it again in a moment. So let's see, Dixon is the first one. And what year is this from? 2015. So I'm going to download again. I'm going to go to my desktop again. I'm going to say Dixon 2015, and then it's to ink or not to ink is the name of the title. So I've saved it, and now my PDF is going to come up. Let's pretend that I've got my 3 articles, and I'll come over and actually submit. So I'm going to go under Browse My Submission, or Browse my computer, and I'll go to that place where I saved my article. I'll click it, I'll upload it. Now this goes and gets submitted into SafeAssign so that in the future we can compare things to this article. This is not a guarantee that you're not plagiarizing if you get a passing or a good SafeAssign score later. SafeAssign is a tool, but it's not a perfect tool, but it just kind of helps us know what's in the journal article. So I submit. Now I'm not in, normally the preview will pop up just like it did for the title page, but I'm not in the student preview right now. Let me just check real quick what other videos there are. Go search. Back. I'm just trying, okay, so I don't need to tell you how to read an empirical article right now. I'll do another quick reminder about topic. So if you go so specific, you might not be able to find any sources, and you have to go broader. If you start too broad, you're going to get overwhelmed with sources. In that case, I would either go over to just plain old Google and see if you can find topics that help you. For example, with my crafts, so let's do anxiety and just try knit. Let's take out linked full text. So we're getting a few more things this way. Anxiety and craft. No, craft is a little too broad. Maybe there's a word that I just don't know to look for. Let's look at So I'm not finding much. Let's see what comes up when I type in social media, because I know there's been a lot of looking at social media and depression, and I'm a little skeptical of some of that work because I think that social media can be a tool for good or a tool for evil. I also think that it's a little bit cyclical because if I know for me, when my anxiety goes up, I tend to spend more time on social media. I don't think it's social media that's driving, I don't think it's a cause. I think it's actually a symptom. It's one of the ways that I notice, hey, I'm not feeling so great. I keep going onto social media and looking at the same stuff over and over again because I feel a little paralyzed and it's a good way to fill some time or whatever. So you can try searching different things. Your paper doesn't need to be boring. You should, for this class, I want you to find a topic that's interesting to you. A lot of athletes write about things related to athletics, whether it's how concussions affect brain processing or looking at rituals, how that helps athletes. You could look at positive psych, so things like what helps people be happy. You could look at the role of money. Does money make people happier? The world is your oyster for this paper. Now, you may not be able to find your first choice of what's interesting, but you can keep looking until you find something interesting. One final reminder, I recommend that you avoid controversial topics because things are usually controversial because they're not clear-cut. Even if it feels clear-cut to you, if it was super clear-cut, there wouldn't be a controversy. If everyone thought it was clear-cut, there wouldn't be a controversy. Like, serial killers, not great for society. That's not really controversial. What to do after might be. So, for example, does the death penalty work? That's controversial because there's some people who believe it does and other people who believe it doesn't. And then other people, then there's the ethical quandary of, even if it does work, do we want to do it as a society? Let's take something more like abortion and mental health. There are studies that suggest that abortion is harmful for mental health of women. There are other studies that suggest that it is not. So you could write a paper saying either one. What I find the real issue here is that these distinctions can be difficult to understand. So I've had students before when they choose any topic that they personally feel very strongly about. There might be topics that are not controversial in a general sense, but are very, very emotional and personal for you. You may not have difficulty reading what's written on the page, understanding what the author is really saying, what the results are really saying. And so when you choose a controversial topic, it's harder to follow the data, to follow where the article is leading you. And that's why I recommend not doing that for this article. Do something that you're interested in, but that you're not so passionate about that you'll have difficulty following where the article leads. Most people don't quite write the paper they think they're going to write because they have to follow the information on the page. Even if they have outside knowledge, this assignment is about learning how to write based on what's in the articles. And you're not doing a really thorough search. You're choosing 3 sources and then later a 4th source that kind of helps tie everything together. That's not a thorough review of any literature. So it's a very small paper with a specific purpose. If I have concerns about your topic, I'll let you know, but it's just my warning. Think very carefully as you're choosing your topic to make sure it's something you're comfortable writing about. I think that's all you need to know for this. How to do an article search. You need 3 articles. They all need to be empirical. And if there's a concern, this assignment I will have you submit over and over until I feel comfortable giving you full credit. Thanks. Bye.